Curses feature prominently in two major film genres, Disney movies and horror movies. And while a Disney curse is usually the work of a spurned wedding guest or narcissistic step-parent and results in little more than an overlong nap and eventual declarations of true love, those in the horror genre tend to be a little less, well, fairy tale. To say that curses are representative of death is maybe a little trite. Firstly, it's the A-level English lit cliché that everything is really about death, or sex, or if you're David Cronenberg, both. Secondly, this is horror we're talking about, so almost everything in the genre is very literally about death, often bloody, violent, and yet somehow strangely entertaining death. But neither of these things makes it untrue. Vampires, werewolves and kaiju can all be defeated with the right application of garlic, silver and impractical giant robots, but a curse can at best be outrun for a little while or passed on to a new victim. Even if you're safe, the curse still continues. And the chances of you being safe are slim at best. In horror, the victims of curses rarely fare well. Declarations of true love are thin on the ground. There's a significant overlap between curses and ghost stories, which makes sense. A curse is a supernatural expression of a powerful negative emotion. Nobody was ever cursed lightly. Ghosts share essentially the same supernatural makeup. They're a continuation of a personality long after that personality should have faded, but is instead unnaturally maintained through the force of an unusually powerful, and almost always negative, emotion. Many ghosts are the result of a violent death, and a curse muttered with the dying breath seems to have a special sort of potency. The Woman in Black, from the film with the same name, is a perfect example. Though it's suggested that she was never quite right, a series of gothic backwater tragedies forged her into a being of pure spite even before she died. An affair with her sister's husband ended with her pregnant and abandoned. Her son was taken away from her, she was refused access to him, and her letters lay undelivered and mouldering. Finally he died, drowned in a bog, in an accident that her sister and former lover survived at the cost of his life, while she was unable to do anything but watch, locked in the attic room of the family home. Making her infamous promise to never forgive, she haunts Eelmarsh House thereafter. The Woman in Black, though she does a good deal of door slamming, chair rocking and other poltergeistic activities, is more than just a ghost. She's an agent of her own curse. Without her, the curse doesn't exist, and without the curse, she's a lonely chain rattler in an artfully abandoned manor house.
Whenever she's been seen, on the causeway, on the marsh, in the grounds of the house, however briefly and whoever by, there has always been one sure and certain result.
Yes.
In some violent or dreadful circumstance, a child has died. So many children. So many children.
A rule set is crucial to a horror movie curse. It gives it form and purpose, like an if-then condition in a particularly malevolent app. Rules also bind the curse into folklore, so that our heroes can be exposited at by mad dowagers or sinister morticians, rather than just obliviously die out of the blue, unaware that anything was ever untoward. But most importantly, rules give a false sense of hope. Because if curses are bound by rules, then maybe there are exceptions to those rules, and maybe there's a get-out clause. Maybe. But as it usually turns out, maybe not. While a curse may, particularly in Asian cinema, attach themselves to a victim seemingly at random, in Western horror, a curse is often a punishment for some transgression. Though, as with the 20-something teenagers of the slasher genre, who are murdered for the relatively harmless indulgences of sex, drugs and folk music sing-alongs, the curse may be way out of proportion with the perceived crime. In Drag Me to Hell, originally titled simply The Curse, we see the same curse enacted twice. In a prologue, a young boy is dragged to hell for stealing a piece of gypsy jewellery. Sam Raimi, the creator of The Evil Dead, is not a fan of figurative titles. In the present, we meet Christine, an ambitious young bank clerk whose career is thwarted by her own vague pleasantness, until she determines to be more cold-hearted and refuses a loan extension to a racist caricature of a gypsy woman who then curses her. Like I said, racist. This curse is also bound by rules. The victim will be haunted by a demon, Lamia, for 3 days, before being dragged into hell on the 4th. The rules as false hope trope is key here, as repeated attempts to get around the structure of the curse are either fruitless or bungled. The less than subtle portrayal of the old gypsy woman in Drag Me to Hell has less to do with any real culture than it does a fairy tale witch, bringing to mind those Disney movies again.
Soon it will be you who comes begging to me.
But the morality of the Curse horror movie is far more in line with the original fairy tales than their bowdlerized animated versions. Moral lessons meant to instruct as much as provide a narrative. These movies serve as skewed sermons where minor personality defects end in the murder of your whole family.
No, they have to make the choice of their own free will. Otherwise, the system doesn't work. It's like the Harbinger. It's this creepy old fuck. Practically wears a sign, "You will die." Why do we put him there? The system. They have to choose to ignore him, and they have to choose what happens in the cellar. Yeah, we rig the game as much as we need to, but in the end, they don't transgress.
They can't be punished.
In the film Sinister, the deadly sin is primarily pride, with a goodly measure of dishonesty, stubbornness, curiosity and recklessness thrown in. Once promising true crime writer, Ellison Oswald finds his brand tarnished when a previous book results in a killer walking free. So he moves his family to the site of a mass murder to attempt one final book. Even outside of the realm of a horror movie, this seems ill-advised. Discovering a collection of 8mm snuff films, Ellison opts to keep them and try and solve the murder himself, which curses him and his family to become the target of a creature known as the Ghoul. As is often the way with curses, an attempt to escape the curse proves to be his undoing, as the creature can only strike once the family has left the house where the previous murder took place. Whilst Ellison Oswald is an almost comically reckless character, even a far more reserved curiosity can still result in a dead cat. In Whistle and I'll Come For You, a university professor on a golfing holiday discovers an ancient whistle and, despite the deeply ominous inscription, "Who is this, who is coming?" and the sanitary concerns of putting something you found on the beach in your mouth, he blows it. Like Drag Me to Hell, the professor is haunted over 3 nights, before being haunted in real life on the 4th, and regressing into a childlike state left muttering, oh no," over and over. Curses, again like fairy tales, have a fixation with significant numbers. Aside from curiosity, the professor is also being punished for his intellectual pride and the certainty that ghosts don't exist. The shroud-draped figure who follows him throughout the story does not, apparently, like being so readily dismissed.
I found it.
What do you mean?
You know, it wasn't easy. I tracked it down mostly through second bidders, people who lost to the auctions. It was in storage, part of an estate collection in Bremen. It took me 1.5 years to get it into our warehouse, and it lasted less than a week. It's about to ship out to a new buyer, so we only have a few days. That should be enough.
A few days for what, Kaylee?
To keep our promise and kill it.
Horror movies are tales of poor choices: the wrong hitchhiker picked up, the wrong door left unlocked, the wrong passage of Latin read aloud from the book Inked in Human Blood. Movies about curses are especially so. Oculus concerns a sinister and apparently sentient mirror that ruins the lives of 2 children, Kaylee and Tim. The origins of the mirror are purposefully obscure, so it's not clear if the mirror itself is cursed, haunted, or otherwise. The real curse in this case is that Kaylee is unable to let go of her past, and so, having escaped the tragedy that killed both her parents and left her brother in a secure psychiatric hospital, she spends most of her life hunting down the same mirror she thinks is responsible. Her entire career as an auctioneer and antiques dealer, and possibly even her choice of fiancé, is essentially one long scheme to get the mirror back in an attempt to destroy it. While Tim manages to temporarily escape the tragedy through rigorous self-discipline, something not usually found in cursed victims, Kaylee's insistence pulls him back in, and ultimately she passes her curse onto him. The rest of his life will now be defined by a second avoidable tragedy. In Japanese horror, curses function more like an infectious disease, with little care for who its victims are or what they do. The 2 most famous examples, Ringu and Ju-on the Grudge, feature similar origin stories, with a girl being murdered by her father in Ringu, and a woman being murdered by her jealous and abusive husband in Ju-on. In Ringu, anyone who watches the cursed videotape dies exactly 1 week later. Like other cursed movies, attempts to placate the curse are fruitless and exhausting. The only way to survive is to pass the curse on to someone else. Like a virus, the curse wants to survive and spread almost more than it wants to kill you. The curse in Ju-on is even more virulent. Anyone who enters the house where Kakio was murdered will in turn be murdered by her ghost and tormented by the even more terrifying ghost of her son Toshio. The area where the victim died is then also affected, and anyone entering that area will be killed, and so forth. If any curse was going to reach pandemic levels, this is it. Perhaps the most famous real-world curse, real at least in the sense that it's not from a movie, is the Curse of Tutankhamun, which has had up to 11 deaths attributed to it, all from the party that opened the tomb in 1922. Of course, not only were they also all attributable to perfectly ordinary, if unfortunate, circumstances, some of them occurring over a decade after the expedition, but there was actually no curse written inside the tomb. Still, it makes for a good story. However, many of the curses that take inspiration from the Curse of the Pharaohs are more concerned with shambling yet strangely noble undead than they are with curses. The 1932 version of The Mummy is a tragic love story as much as it is a horror film, and its 1999 remake is an attempt to make Raiders of the Lost Ark without Harrison Ford's prohibitive wage packet, and unfortunately also without Steven Spielberg's talents. The movie franchise that most accurately reflects this type of curse, where a group of people encounter a significant event and are then killed in a variety of accidents, is the Final Destination series.
Could you be a little quieter with that thing, please?
Yeah, sure. I'll just put it on quiet mode.
That would be good.
Each film follows the same pattern. A group of attractive Americans escape death in some terrible mass tragedy because one of them is psychic. A plane crash, a motorway pile-up, and a bridge collapse will feature. However, death can't be cheated and everyone dies in increasingly elaborate Rube Goldberg scenarios.
No, the baby's alright. I need to know if the baby's alright. It's a boy.
The Final Destination films aren't seeking to address any great philosophical need. They're intended to entertain with improbable grand guignol, down to featuring a compilation of the best deaths set to AC/DC's If You Want Blood, You've Got It. But they sort of get there by accident, by being literally about the inevitability of death. We're all cursed with mortality, and despite all our bargaining and attempts to avoid it, like the victims of a horror movie curse, we're doomed to die. Not that that stops us passing on the same curse over and over again.